All right, we are on episode 8 of the Everyone Belongs podcast. I am Ben.
And I'm Cammie.
Welcome to the show. Exciting day today. I'm very excited about what we're covering today, just because of the format. Last week, I asked people if they had any questions to post them in the YouTube comments or on our Facebook page, and so many people ask questions. And it's so much more fun to me to answer questions than to just like prepare speeches or monologues of historical accounts.
Yeah.
Feels like a conversation, actually.
Yeah. Yep.
But before we get into that, we have an oopsie to update you on, because I've got some new information that I want to correct here. Just got this information this last week. Last episode 7, I made this statement in telling the story that my old business partner, John, called me up and told me that based upon what he had heard from my other business partner, Colin, he was no longer going to talk to me anymore. And his recommendation was that I should submit to Stephen. Well, this week, that person contacted me, and he did not ask me to correct the record, but I still want to do it, just because I would like to get the facts as accurate as possible. And what he said was that he didn't cancel. He didn't say he couldn't meet with me ever. What he said was that he was canceling our monthly meeting, which I took as kind of forever, but that is not how he intended it. And when he said that this week, he sent me a message and said, hey, this isn't how that actually happened from my perspective. I believe him. So I want to correct the record on that for those of you who were listening to that story.
Cool.
All right. Maybe that was for me. I just feel like this is a shitty enough situation as it is. The last thing I want to contribute to is misinformation.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we have here is we have 8 pages of questions, basically. So originally this was supposed to be 1 episode. Now I'm thinking it could be 2, and it could even bleed into 3.
Yeah.
We'll
see.
We're gonna have fun till we stop having fun. Okay. Cammie, would you like to read the first question? First of all,
Yes.
Thank you to everyone that left questions.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that.
Yeah. It's fun for us to, as fun as this can be, I suppose, to have more of a dialogue than just talking.
And it's gonna be all over the place today. I think this will make sense for people that have heard this story. Is that our kid writing on this table? That kind of pisses me off. I feel like she writes on everything. Okay.
Can deal with it later.
Should probably not be podcasting about that.
Okay. First question here is from Hudson. It had 27 likes. So a lot of people want to hear this.
These are like the categories.
Okay, so this is under the category family. How have Ben's parents remained in a close relationship with you, all when they are members of a faith group that has cast you out? Yeah, I thought about this.
A lot of people asked this and contrasted it with your family.
Yeah. There's probably several answers for this, but I think one of them is my family is and has always been leaders in this faith group. I grew up, my dad was a pastor for all of my growing up years, and my brother is now a pastor of sorts. So I think that provides this atmosphere or this pressure of you got to have all your shit together. Your reputation is like super important. So I think that's one of the factors.
I think that's a big factor.
It's a big factor. Yeah. And because I think Ben's parents, we have different beliefs than them, but it's not threatening to them.
They identified as being Christian, but I feel like it consumes 5% of their life.
Yeah.
And I used to always
10,
look down on that when I
probably.
was in my intense stages of Christianity. I'd be
Yeah.
like, you need to be more sold out. Well, come to find out,
We're glad you're
I'm
not
really glad.
so sold out.
Because when all this stuff started happening to us, it literally affected my relationship with them approximately 0
Yeah.
in any practical way.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Now, I am curious, and when this started going down, especially this last summer, I specifically sat my parents down because we go out to lunch every Friday, and I said, I'm really curious to hear you guys' thoughts about what it's like to believe in a religion that excludes all 3 of your children. Because we had just got denied from cooking at Bible camp for not being willing to say that it's a sin to be gay. So my brother and my sister would also not be allowed to serve at that Bible camp. So I asked this question, what's it like having kids that don't fit into your faith, basically? And then my mom said, this honeydew melon is really good. I was like, okay.
Okay. That's how you do it. Great. Well, it's better than my family, so hats off to you.
And she was right. It was good honeydew melon.
Yeah, for the record.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Moving along.
Our second question is under kids category.
Okay, and this question or iterations of it was asked by a lot of people. A lot of people wanted to know how this impacted the kids.
Yep. How did you explain to your children what was happening with their uncle? They've lost family and friends too. It would be hard enough to deal with all you have if it were just you two, but now you have to lead your family. Did the children get rejected from their friends as well? Yeah. I mean, when the shit really hit the fan, 3.5 years ago, I would say there was a good year where we were just surviving. So we weren't really talking through a whole lot with our family, and we didn't really know how to talk through or what was beneficial to talk through with them.
It was so hard because, first of all, we didn't fully know what was going on.
Right.
But these were also it was their uncle and their aunt and their cousins that we're talking about. And we didn't want to talk shit about them. It was almost embarrassing to tell them. But then with the breach that was happening, it was someone was going to look bad. It was either us or them.
Well, and to compound it, there was families that we had been doing life with for several years that just moved away. And they were friends with the kids.
Hanging out 7 days a week, 2 doors down type of friends.
Yeah. So it left a bigger hole than my family.
And
because we weren't really close with my family then.
And one of our kids was highly social.
Right.
So this it was
a huge.
our kids didn't do school really at that time, but it would be changing schools in the middle of school year, and yanking everything out from your kid.
Yeah.
So our kids were, it was very painful. I just remember them blaming us a lot.
They were, upset at us, and I totally understand. I mean, they didn't have anyone else. They didn't have the full story. We didn't even have the full story, and they're only kids.
Yeah, they didn't know what was going on. We didn't really feel at liberty. I mean, we were going to our counselor once a week just to fucking
Survive.
feel like we were like, I don't want to say not suicidal because I don't think that's a little dramatic, but not crazy. So then when it comes to like tell our kids, like, if it felt like it would have been too overwhelming to lay it on them, and I don't think we would have had much positive to say at that point. So it was really hard.
Right. So I think eventually we did start having conversations.
And we just started telling them what's happened.
Right.
And I think two things happened that I saw. One is they got used to, they made new friends. And
they moved on.
And in some ways, they were able to maintain some of the relationships.
Right.
Because this is the weird thing. The parents were boycotting us, I think more specifically me, but it turned out being us. But they didn't tell their kids not to hang out with their kids. So it wasn't like a full-on, what do you call it, shunning or excommunication like of our entire family. Nothing was official. You know, we've said this a couple times. Like there's a lot of gray area.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone felt comfortable saying your kids can't hang out with their kids, because I think that would have seemed too extreme even for these people.
Yeah.
But they dropped us like a fucking hot potato. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we eventually talked through stuff little by little, as we felt like our head was above water finally, and we were able to, and we grasped what was going on more.
And then this funny thing started to happen. Our kids started to hang out with other people's kids that were still in this environment.
Yeah. Cousins.
And started to compare notes.
Yeah.
And they kind of came back and they said, oh, this is crazy. Like they were now seeing what it was still like to be inside the bubble that we were in at one point. And just to clarify, the biggest thing that our kids resented us for was it was that one December, I don't remember what year it was, where we finally canceled all of our events. Mm-hmm. Because we felt like there was an unhealthy dynamic in the community that we were participating in. Mm-hmm. And in canceling all those events, our kids like blamed us. They were like, oh, we're close to all these people and now we're not. Mm-hmm. And it's your fault. Mm-hmm. And we also had to own that part of it and say, yeah, we're sorry.
Part of it was our fault.
Well, if anything, what we realized was that we were artificially too close to people. Mm-hmm. And we kind of, in a way, made promises to our kids that we weren't able to keep, or wrote checks we weren't able to cash. Not explicitly, but implicitly, by moving in next to these families and living life with them, you know.
In a way that wasn't sustainable. Yeah.
So now, though, I would say the kids are doing very well with it because they are smart enough and have seen enough evidence and have dealt with the trauma to where they are like I haven't heard them complain about us in the last year or two. I think they are pretty supportive.
Not about that, at least.
Yeah, that's
they
true.
still complain.
No, I'm not saying.
But
yeah. Okay.
Yep. Okay, next question. How would you feel if your older children decided they wanted a relationship with some of your estranged family members, and how would you handle it? And this question's by Lacey. So this kind of goes together. Our kids have decided they wanted a relationship with some of the estranged family members, but to us, they're not really well, I guess some of them are. It's been a little hard for me, especially with my parents, them hanging out with my parents. It feels weird. It also feels like it doesn't feel clean, you know, of just like, okay, like I'm not talking to you. It's like if they are still hanging out with them, I still have to be reminded of them. So it's this reminder of like, oh yeah, you exist, whatever. I mean, not that I forget, but it's just in my face more. And so that can be a little hard. It brings up some emotions for me. But some of the family members, like especially the cousins and stuff, like I am actually really glad that our kids are still connecting with some of them. just because I think that will serve them later on in life. Like if they ever, yeah, I mean, I don't think they need to, the kids, it's different than the parents' issues. The kids don't have the same issues.
Yeah, but I think that's even kind of a novel concept in a way.
Yeah.
Because I think the most natural thing, if a system, I mean, if you just read the comments, like people are like, wow, what happened to you guys? Like, sucks. Like, you got the kick shit out of you. Is that what you said?
Yeah, something like
last
that.
week? I mean, you guys got, I mean, we're going to answer another question later on about spiritual abuse, but we got our asses kicked by some pretty specific people in some pretty damaging ways. And it would be a very natural response emotionally for us to say, fine, you're not hanging out with them anymore because they're bad. They're dangerous. That place is no good. But we don't believe that about the people.
Yeah.
We believe some of the beliefs are damaging, like have danger associated with it. That's why we created this podcast, really, is to talk about some of those beliefs that we think have been damaging to us and others. But those people aren't the enemy. I don't see them as the enemy. Now we've learned that we've had to create some boundaries to protect ourselves because they don't have our best interests in mind.
It doesn't mean we have to like them.
Yeah. But we also don't have to position ourselves against them.
Right.
And I think when we were going through our kids are begging to hang out, we had to ask, if we say no, is it just going to be this like taking an emotional stand to protect my ego? Or is it actually in our kids' best interest? And I think I came to the conclusion at that time, it would just be for my ego. I would be like kind of withholding our family to penalize the other family. And I don't even think that works. I don't think that teaches anyone any lesson. And I think it makes everyone lose.
Yeah. I also just really don't like the idea of blaming the kids for their parents' issues. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's some carryover, but I just don't think that's very fair.
We also experienced this summer, and we're going to get into this story more, but where the Bible camp we grew up at basically told us we weren't welcome there anymore this summer, and our kids still decided to go, and we gave them that choice. And at first it was hard emotionally because it was like, oh, you should choose our side instead of their side. But I feel like if we have that mindset, we've already lost. If we're pitting ourselves against, I mean, that's what they're doing. They're viewing us as a threat, and we're the bad guys, and they need to cast us away from them. But I don't think the way that you necessarily beat that type of separation is by creating more separation.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. This is under motive and retribution. This is from Christine, and it got 14 likes.
So I'm just going to warn you here.
Yeah.
I'm going to go nuts on this question.
Oh, okay. Thanks for the warning.
Like nuts.
Like jumping up and down.
No.
Yelling.
No, I don't.
Just talking a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you reconcile everyone belonging with calling out those who hurt you and sort of making them not belong? Through your lens, they are victims to the broken system of hierarchy too.
So,
permission to go nuts.
Permission to go nuts. Thank you for giving me that permission. The reason why I'm going to go nuts here is because I don't have a beef with Christine. I'm really glad that she asked this question, and she's actually a friend of ours anyways. But this line of thought has been something I have personally wrestled with so much for the last 3 years, and it's something I have heard so many times and felt for the last 3 years.
Yeah. So,
Christine, you're going to get the brunt of it. Well, it's not really you
it's
personally,
not personal.
But your question is getting the brunt of it right now. Yeah, it's not personal at all. So here's my beef. She asks, how do you reconcile everyone belonging with calling out those who hurt you? So that phrase, I want to focus on that, calling out. Like, what does that mean? And when is that phrase used, and who does it get used against? And the case I kind of want to make is, when you're in the power structure and everything's going good, and you're telling your story, and you're like talking about saved people and unsaved people and pastors and drunkards. No one accuses you of calling anyone out when you're just telling your story. But the second you get kind of like exiled or cast out or black sheeped or pushed aside, now all of a sudden, if you tell your story honestly and truthfully, you get accused of calling someone out.
So are you saying, like, if I were to talk about the youth pastor that abused me and I was just sharing my story, and that would be okay?
No.
It would not be okay.
I don't think so. Like, this is why, I mean,
it would be the same thing as
people would come to you, and this is, I mean, the Me Too culture is very unique right now, where women for the first time ever are actually being applauded, being the less powerful for coming out. They're actually heroes more so than ever in this day and age.
Yeah.
But you know how, Cammie and I both read this book called Missoula by John Krakauer, and it's all about rape culture in college towns. And for the most part, the culture was when women got raped and they came forward, they were challenged and belittled. And they were asked, like, you know, when they were just telling these stories about what happened to them, people would approach them and say, what are you trying to do? Ruin this guy's life? What are you trying to just get attention? What are you trying to just call this guy out or do something? And why do women who get raped want to talk about it or need to talk about it?
As a part of their healing, as a part of making sure this person doesn't do this again.
Yeah, it's a part of justice in their life. You know, I mean, I feel the need to tell my story honestly. And all I know is for 3 years, I felt like I haven't been able to do that. And then we tell our story. And I want to, you know, I'm really glad this is all recorded on audio, you know, so people can go back and listen to this themselves. And I'm fine with being called out in this in the comments. But what we attempted to do is just tell the story as honestly as possible with as little energy as possible. You know, I mean, I don't think we're coming from a massive place of hurt or revenge right now, trying to bring people down. If we were to do that, there's some things I would have done very differently. If I wanted to bring Steven or Jeremy down or, you know, get them fired or whatever. But I also felt like to make the story have integrity, if we hide names and hide dates and hide organization places and all these things, then I feel like the story loses some of its honesty and integrity.
And then aren't we condoning or contributing to a culture of, if this happens to you, keep it to yourself? This, like, kind of like adding to the culture of secrecy. And you know, like, maybe some people would say, oh, you can tell a few people, but to tell the world about it, if you don't do that, the consequences, I think, are actually pretty great. Imagine if no one ever did that, right? If no one ever whistleblowed anyone and saying, like, hey, this happened to me, I don't think this is okay. Do you think this is okay? You know, then it's just like anyone could do anything to anyone and there would be no repercussions at all. I mean, I think that's whatever the government tries to do, whatever they need to do and they're not, but I don't know. Like, I do think there's a way to call out people that ruins their lives that I don't think I agree with that.
Yeah, if you're doing it just to hurt someone.
Because then you're just perpetuating you're hurt, so you hurt back. So it's like when a 2-year-old gets their toy stolen and then the 2-year-old hits the other 2-year-old.
Well, I'm fine if someone wants to do that. But yeah. I think that's actually, I don't know what I'd call that, but I don't think we're doing that. That's not my goal, at least.
I mean, we're trying to just tell our story as honestly as we can. Now, there may be some repercussions for these people of us telling our story to the internet.
And what we've decided is that it's not our responsibility to cover for their repercussions anymore. But I mean, the question I would pose, and I just want you guys to think about this, because this is something we've seen in this type of culture, that whatever culture finds itself on with the less power. It could be women, it could be minorities, it could be gay community, LGBTQ plus, it could be our situation, ex-evangelicals. But this is the question I want to pose to you: is there a way for oppressed people to tell their stories and not be accused of calling someone out? And as I was reading the stories in the Facebook group, the private one, there's a lot of stories. And I have the feeling that if these people were to tell their stories in their churches, they would get accused of causing trouble, trying to get attention, calling people out, trying to hurt people, bring people down, causing a ruckus. I mean, disturbing the peace. All these ways that we kind of read into motive all of a sudden. And for me, reading into motive is one of the most dangerous things and dismissive things we can do. And I'm not saying that's what Christine was saying, but I think overlapped in this world that gets done quite a bit. So let me give you one example. And because when we read into motive, quite often it's a way for us to dismiss the story itself. One of the most damaging things I think happens with parenting that we also have done, but I don't think we do anymore, is when our kids do something, they act out, that phrase, they're just trying to get attention. So if you're a 3-year-old boy and he's like screaming, and you'll have two parents sitting there, and one parent will say, he's just trying to get attention, which basically means whatever he's doing is not valid.
Or even that getting attention's wrong.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with that. And as humans, don't we have the need to get attention?
Well, it's just a way of dismissing the person and their story at that time.
Yeah.
So I actually want to read this quote right here.
Yeah.
And by read, I mean, can
we
we
read it? All right. This is by Dr. Judith Herman.
From
Trauma and Recovery. Those who attempt to describe the atrocities that they have witnessed also risk their own credibility. To speak publicly about one's knowledge of atrocities is to invite the stigma that attaches to victims. It is very tempting to take the side of the perpetrator. All the perpetrator asks is that the bystander do nothing. The victim, on the contrary, asks the bystander to share the burden of pain.
So in our culture, the point of that reading is there's a stigma around weakness. When you say you've been raped, when you say that you've been kicked out, like, I felt it. It was really hard to talk about. I didn't want to do it. And there's a reason why we kept silent for 3 years.
You're a crybaby. Just deal with it. Kind of stigma where...
Yeah, and it's like you're asking for sympathy. Or I just knew, when you're in the center in the strong organization, everyone wants to be you. And I just know from how quickly we got dropped by so many people, we got put into a less desirable position. And almost the more we talk about it, the more we shoot ourselves in the foot in one way.
Yeah.
But I also want to just read. Geez, I am kicking this dead horse, but I'm gonna kick it. I'm kicking.
You said you're gonna go nuts.
Also, can you have the kids turn the music down, please, of the movie? Okay. This I think I got. I saw this today. Okay, someone tagged me in their Instagram post today, and I saw this, and I was like, I'm going to quote you tonight. Her name's Helena. Her Instagram thing is Adapt Bleem, and I'm going to post these links to all these. Anything we're sharing today, I'll post links in the description, okay, of the show notes. And this is what her Instagram page said, and she is I don't know what to call them anymore, sorry, handicapped, especially abled. She looks like she's in a wheelchair. I've never seen her before, but I just from the picture. Few years after I moved across the world, leaving behind everything I ever knew and every relative I have, around the same time I started acquiring my disability. Our family experienced financial hardship. I became the black sheep of the flock by advocating for LGBTQ positive plus folks, and I lost the only community I had, which in combination with my fundamentalist upbringing resulted in full-blown religious trauma. When I started getting profoundly unwell and sought medical help, what I got in the beginning was gaslighting and accusations of maligning. What I learned is that if you have privilege, you have the power to tell your side of the story. The majority gets to control the narrative. The systems, organization, and other power structures go into great length to ensure your message gets across. My big plea for us is to listen, to really listen to the abused, excommunicated, marginalized, exiled, vilified, accused, sentenced, and ostracized. Listen to the people you are afraid of. Listen to the apostates, the sinners, to the pitied. I promise we have a good story to tell. I promise we don't want handouts. I promise we didn't take the easy way out. If you listen, you will hear stories of injustice, stories of religious trauma, medical trauma, family trauma, disabled abuse, racially driven abuse, refugee and immigrant abuse, etc. So she's just saying, like, that when you have privilege, the privileged, their story is the loudest. And there's a reason why.
Yeah.
And in a certain way, I feel like we have privilege. And fuck, am I still talking about this? I guess I am, because I want to read these. Can you just mow through these two stories right here real quick?
Okay. So this is a response from Joe. At first, I was a little leery of listening to this new podcast, but I'm now glad I did. Even though I was generally aware of your religious transformation, I thought this might be some way of witnessing or whatever. One of my frustrations from when I was binge watching your vlogs was how you would allude to some major fucking things going on in your life, but you wouldn't provide any details. I just figured that they were your business and moved on to the next interesting YouTube video. This podcast is filling in all of the blanks I had noticed, so thanks for that. And this response is from Amy. Y'all, I am blown away and left speechless. I have watched your vlog for years, and throughout the years, as you know, I've voiced my opinion about many things. Things that made me take a deeper look inside myself, things that opened up conversations in my household, and things that I strongly disagreed with you on. It all makes so much sense now, and I'm left speechless.
So these were just two responses I got in this last week of people who have heard our story for years. And we have gotten so many comments over the years of people saying, what are you going through? Will you share what you believe? Will you share what you've been through? And we said, no, we're not ready. We won't. We felt like we needed to protect the people. We felt like we were too traumatized ourselves. And I think we felt like our story we didn't have the right or worth to share it. And it was really frustrating. It was frustrating to a lot of people. I mean, we're vlogging 5 times a week, sharing everything, being completely transparent about life in general. But then when we go to counseling, we're like, man, that session was really hard. We talked about some relationships and some really hard decisions we had to make in like vague ways like that, really just to protect the people and ourselves at the time.
Yeah, and I think we didn't have enough strength to tell our story at that point.
Yeah. But that disconnect was so massive for our audience and for ourselves, because here's the most valuable and intense thing going on in our life ever.
Yeah.
And we're not able to talk about it. So that's my response. For the first time ever, we're able to talk about it. So to get accused, and I'm not even saying Christina's doing this by her comment, but a lot of people have done this where they're like, oh, now you're
using this platform to blast people or whatever.
Yeah, I'm like, get the fuck out. Finally, we're not hiding our story and other people's, and we're not covering up anymore. So if that's what calling out is, yeah.
Sign me up.
Sign me up. Okay, sorry. That took so long, not sorry.
Okay, we're moving on here. This is from Benjamin. How do you guys feel about the possibility of a person emailing the entire staff of Crossroads, suggesting to each of them that they might enjoy your podcast with a link? Smiley face.
Okay, so do you know who this is?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is someone we know in real life.
And this guy, we've had a back and forth relationship that we did not be in touch for quite a while. And lately I've been in touch. And I feel like this dude is a fucking one-man picketing army. He's like a digital picketer. Like, he's an advocate for justice for those who are marginalized, especially by churches, because I know part of his background, but he is relentless. I've watched what he does, and it's like, in one sense, I admire the hell out of it.
Yeah.
But here's this question. So he's offering to email every single person at Crossroads, which is the church where Stephen is employed, and he's asking what we think about that. So,
well, first, like, can I say I feel a little endeared that he's even willing to do that. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm just like, thanks, Benjamin. I appreciate your heart. But
so I'm going to answer this in two ways. One is he literally asked, how do you guys feel about this? And I would say, I don't feel good about that.
Yeah.
That's my feeling.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want that to happen. It's not why we made the podcast. We could have done this, but we're not doing it.
We actually really strongly considered this in counseling, whether or not to go this route.
Yeah, whether to, like, go to war against the fucking machine.
Yeah.
Because we did feel like a casualty, and we saw other casualties. But there's a few things I want to point out as to why. One is, this is pragmatic, but Stephen, although he is employed by Crossroads, I don't see him as acting on behalf of Crossroads.
When he was having all these interactions with us.
Correct.
Yeah.
In other words, it wasn't Crossroads we actually got kicked out of.
Yeah. I would say it's a little bit gray or just not super clear, but I would not say he was acting on Crossroads' behalf. And
the other mindset thing is that, you say in this comment, I'm assuming you're joking, but maybe you're not. And it is that you say, how would you guys feel about the possibility of me emailing the entire staff, suggesting to them that they might enjoy your podcast? I would say 99% of people will not enjoy the podcast. And therefore, you're contributing to, like, basically a spam problem. I don't know how else to say it, but it almost dulls the message, I think, in a way.
Yeah, because it's one thing if someone seeks this out, because even by them seeking it out, it kind of shows they're ready to hear this type of thing. But if someone just, like, shoves it in their face, it's like, hey, most people don't want to hear this that are in Crossroads. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, because it's working for them.
Right.
For now. And, I mean, just to reiterate, our goal is not to bring this system down, because I feel like the problem is actually bigger than the system itself. And that's why we're approaching it the way we are, by storytelling and sharing what we're learning. Because I wouldn't be happy if Stephen got fired, if Jeremy got fired, or if Crossroads shut down. That would not be a win to me. That's not necessarily progress, because these problems then just move to other places.
That's true, but what about, like, I wouldn't feel super good about that either. But what about stopping someone from perpetuating, like, the way that they interact with people that's harmful? I mean, I guess they would just find another church. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like,
they would find another church. And if the big question I have, because this is what happened when we haven't even gotten into the story yet, but when we started coming out with pieces of our story, people started suggesting that we sue Stephen for defamation of character from this letter that went out.
Yeah.
Or go to the head pastor and say, this is happening, you should know. But for the amount of energy it would take for us to kind of, like, go on this battle in that way, at least, because I feel like we're battling it in other ways. I feel like you have to ask this other question, which is, why is this person in this position of power to begin with? Why have they been trusted for 10 years? Like,
Right.
and the more you hear stories from that organization, this type of shit happens all the time. It's not unusual. So you can get rid of the guy and feel good about yourself, but they're going to replace the guy with another guy. You know, so
Yep.
anyways,
And I would say it's not like there's never a place for this, probably. I mean,
well, that's why I actually love what Benjamin's doing.
yeah.
It makes me uncomfortable, but he knows that. It makes everyone uncomfortable. But in a way, he's advocating for the people with no voices.
Yeah. Which I think is
So
amazing.
There was 2 points I said I was going to say. One is, I answer your question honestly. How do I feel about it? I don't feel great about it. But the second thing I would say is, you do you and do whatever the hell you want, and we'll support it because you have to do what you feel like is put on your heart to do. And I don't even feel like we own the story. We're releasing it out into the world for you guys to do what you want with it. And, you know, I don't want the email to say Ben and Cammie Crawford, like, wanted you to be blasted. Like, because that's not true. But, you know, I'm also not going to say, I don't feel like I have the power to shut it down. I don't want that type of power. No. It's not my, it's.
Well, we're putting it out on the internet. I kind of think we're already saying, like, you can take this and give it to anyone.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So. Okay.
Cool. We're moving on.
Moving on to the next section,
which is therapy. Okay, this is an anonymous question. I know your therapist has helped you guys process through this. Would you be willing to share perhaps the top 2 to 3 ideas he's given or shared that have helped you? Okay, I'll just say the first one is stay on your side of the road.
With sin and with marriage and fucking 2 becoming 1 and community, there was all this lingo we had for why it's your job to be in everyone else's business.
Everything's enmeshed, and there's biblical reasons to back that up.
These are psychological terms of enmeshment and codependency, and it's all like fully endorsed by the church when you're like praying for people and sharing prayer requests and trying to fix people and rebuking people and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so stay in your road was probably the first thing.
The second thing is stick with behaviors, not motives. Oh man, this one hurts. I mean, this is what I like. Yeah, I mean, I think it really, really hurts people when you try to judge their heart and say, you did this because you're stupid or you're a jerk or you're narcissistic or you're prideful, and you have no behaviors to back that up, or there's nowhere to go with that. I mean, it's one, if you have a behavior, it's like the person who's being accused of the behavior can then have the ability to say, oh, I'm sorry, I won't do that again.
But you don't know why people do things. Yeah. And
it's really arrogant
and
to assume you know someone's motive.
The irony is when we first went to this therapist and he heard what we were being accused of with pride, he said, well, one of the things Jesus himself rallied on the most was actually judging people's hearts, which is what they're doing against you. More than anything, he got pissed off by that. Yeah.
Okay.
And one other example of that with kids, it's easy to see kids like, let's say they're shaking and spilling milk. And you're like, stop it. Are you trying to ruin my life? I mean, I actually say this shit and you believe it. Like they're rebelling or they're trying to ruin your kitchen or ruin your life. And they're just having fun. So it's one thing to say, stop shaking the milk, but it's another thing to act as if you know or to declare why they're doing it.
They're plotting your demise.
And I actually think that's just a normal parenting thing because it feels that way. It feels like they're ruining your life.
Yeah, which...
You're like, they must be doing it on purpose.
That's fine. You know, everyone has those like impulses of that, those knee-jerk reactions of like, oh, you're doing this because of this. But if we can just have more awareness, that would be great as to why we're saying what we're saying. So the third one is not everything is a sin.
So when we went into this counseling, we were just in this mindset of like, it was just like everything was either good or bad and sin or not sin. And, you know, like cigarettes are sinful, but cigars are not sinful. And R-rated movies are maybe a little sinful, but X-rated movies are always sinful. Mm-hmm. And there was a few scenarios that were tossed our way while in therapy, not necessarily all by our therapist, but I'll share a few. Like, what if you see a guy that's smoking pot? Mm-hmm. And you're like, I mean, that's almost a no-brainer because that one's so legal now and accepted even by so many Christians.
Culturally
Let's
acceptable.
talk about cocaine. Okay, and I don't know my drugs, so forgive me, but this analogy is going to be gross, but you'll get the idea. You see some guy do cocaine, and you're like, that guy's sinning. The Bible says you should something about self-control and da-da-da. And you're like, he's doing cocaine, mind check, sinner. Okay? And you're like, I don't do cocaine, so I'm better than him, basically, is what you conclude. Well, what if you were to find out that yesterday he was doing heroin 20 out of 24 hours? Mm-hmm. And that to get off of heroin, he actually met with a pastor, and now he's doing cocaine, and he's doing cocaine once a day instead of heroin for 20 hours a day. Mm-hmm. So in his world, that's progress. Mm-hmm. But as a Christian, the only lingo that I had before was this like category that was like so black or white that didn't recognize progress. It just recognized, is your behavior in or is it out?
Is it bad or is it good?
And that's so unhelpful to talk to the person that's doing cocaine once instead of heroin for 20 hours and say, you're in sin.
Yeah.
Okay, next question.
Okay. This is from Caitlin. Recently, I have been moving away from framing thoughts and behaviors as inherently good, evil, sin, not sin, and instead thinking of things in terms of adaptive, maladaptive to a given system or helpful, unhelpful in accomplishing a goal or upholding a value. It sounds to me like maybe your counselor was helping you change your thinking in this direction too. If yes, have you found that shift in thinking helpful? Do you still find value in calling things good and evil, sin, not sin? This is a really good question.
Yes.
Okay, yes. Our counselor really did help us get out of this like sin obsessed mindset. And he didn't do it, he did it because we wanted it. You know, I mean, it wasn't like, hey, you guys need to snap out of this. But it was, I think we were being really harmed by it, being harmed by this way of thinking. It was actually really harming us. And so to get out of that way of thinking, yes, it was incredibly helpful to love ourselves and to love other people. Because as long as we had this like mindset, this black or white mindset, I don't really think I was able to really, I always judge myself. I always was trying to framework, oh man, am I bad today? Or did I just do something bad? Or, and yeah, anyways.
I don't know what you're talking about anymore.
Okay. Well, how do you want to answer that?
Well, she's asking, do you find value in calling things good, evil, or sin or not sin?
Well, yeah, because I said yes, because I think it helped to stop calling it that or seeing it that way has actually helped me love myself and love other people better.
Okay, so not seeing it as good and evil and sin as not sin. Yeah, yes. I would totally agree.
Yeah.
So to summarize, those labels of calling things good or evil or sin or not sin, that's almost left our vocabulary entirely in the last year or two.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just has not been helpful. And I think one of the biggest shifts we made in counseling, one day our therapist looks at us and he said, what do you say? You guys are thinking less dualistically. Mm-hmm.
And sorry, go ahead.
Which I think when you're first in the Christian world, that sounds like heresy to not talk about sin, not sin. And it's not that I don't have actually a definition of sin, but it is not anywhere what it was, which is behavior oriented. Mm-hmm. It's actually more mindset oriented. And if you look at Jesus's role on earth, like specifically in the New Testament, like the stories, he was constantly fucking with people to get them to think less dualistically. Like, he wasn't really teaching them that rules don't matter, or like, you got the wrong rule, follow this rule. He was constantly trying to like blow up that system of like grading people on right or wrong, period.
Yeah.
So at least that's my interpretation. And if you want to read more about that concept, there's a book called The Wisdom Jesus by Cynthia Bourgeault. Link below.
I don't really find the word sin helpful for me at all anymore. And I mean, I do think there are behaviors that are more damaging to people, but that word is so loaded for me that it's just, it ceased to be helpful. But I actually think it was also scary to get out of that way of thinking. It was scary as fuck. Really, it was. I mean, I don't want to like
our only way of orienting our life
for 38 years.
You're like avoiding sin.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you're seeking God, but how you seek God is by avoiding sin. Right. I mean, my identity in high school was a non-swearing, non-partier, non-sexually active, whatever you call that, virgin.
Yes.
That was one of my main identities, was avoiding sin. So then when you erase that definition,
your whole way of feeling good about yourself is no longer there anymore. Like, you have to find some other reason to feel good about yourself. Okay, next question. This is from Clark. Finding a good therapist is typically really tricky. Did you just manage to get lucky with the one that you chose? Also, did Stephen or the others try to have a hand in which therapist you went to? If not, I'm really surprised they didn't try to recommend an approved faith-based counselor. Quote. I think we got lucky. Incredibly lucky.
Yeah.
Incredibly. Like, if you believe in a God, that's probably how it happened. Like, yeah, because, wow. Stephen or no one had any hand in which therapist they went. Thankfully, they gave us free.
Yeah, but they did endorse him up front because he is on Crossroads' list of like approved counselors.
Okay, but we found him and we chose him. You chose him. And then they endorsed him.
Yeah, they were like, great. And then when they were like, we've heard great things about him. And then when they found out what he was saying,
they're like,
this guy can't be trusted.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Wow.
They were like, you're rebelling against us now.
Mm-hmm.
So funny how that works out. Mm-hmm. But if someone was to ask me how they would find a therapist, I would say I would recommend a non-faith-based therapist. No brainer at this point. Hands down. Find someone that is good at spotting patterns and a good, I don't want to say a good listener.
We'll ask questions. We'll help you get to your answer by asking questions, but not like spoon feeding you.
Yeah. To me, when I look back at Christian counseling, what I know of it, what I've seen of it, to me it's such a pile of bullshit. And I don't want to write off the whole thing because I'm sure it has its place, but compared to like real therapy that we've seen, a lot of Christian counseling feels to me like it's more personalized sermons. It's them
like mentorship.
It's them giving you answers, whether they're biblical or not. And I'm not even against the Bible in this case. I'm not even saying. But therapy can be so much more powerful than telling you what you ought to believe. It can actually help you understand why you believe what you believe.
I also think that typically what I've seen is Christian counselors don't respect, or I should say faith-based counselors, I guess, don't respect the psychological world as much, which I think is, in my opinion, the psychological world is much needed in therapy. Next question is from Kara. Do you consider what you participated in and what was perpetrated on as spiritual abuse?
That's actually a really good question. She was the only
It is
person
a
that
good
asked that.
question.
And I have trouble with this one.
Like, what's the
and
definition of abuse? Like, let's take the spiritual out of it. But,
That's what's tricky about it.
like, if I were to, like, look it up on Google right now, what would it say?
So I guess I would ask you guys
Yeah.
first. Do you think it's spiritual abuse? And of course, aware that there's always two sides to every story. But let's assume that our story is true, that our facts and we have emails and audio messages and calendars and logs to support our side. If that is true, would you consider that spiritual abuse? I'm really interested to know.
So abuse, I'm going to take a stab at it, is an authority figure doing, like, crossing the line with someone underneath them, or, like, using their power to harm. But then the word harm, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not
tricky.
I don't think it's cut or dry. And
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm going to say is this. In one hand, I would say absolutely that's spiritual abuse. I mean, how the fuck could it not be? I mean, it wrecked our lives. It was completely reckless.
Yeah.
And it was very damaging. That's one side of the coin. Were you going to add something?
Well, I was just going to say, because in my personal story, I have abuse in my childhood. And so from my experience, using the word abuse, I think should be used as long as it's helpful for you. But when it ceases to be helpful in that, like, I think if you're always taking the victim mentality and never moving on from it, and you're just like, I was abused. I do think it's really important to acknowledge the abuse, like, for sure. And I think if it's helpful for you to find healing in that, I think people actually do need to acknowledge, what is what, basically.
Yeah. I think because we were on a ladder and we were not at the top, we were in the middle. And there was people above us and there's people below us. I kind of chose a different mentality. And you could say that what happened above us was abusive to us, and therefore what we did to people below us was abusive to them. But, the thing that I also realized through this whole thing is that all the involvement was 100% optional. Our involvement, what we submitted to by David and Stephen and Jeremy, was completely optional. So if it was abuse, it was abuse that we opted into. And the people that were underneath us, they also agreed to that role. Yeah. There was no threats being made.
I definitely think it was bullying. I'll say that.
Yeah. And so that's where it's a little tricky. Like, I've never used that word of spiritual abuse was done to us, but I couldn't deny it or disagree with it either. It just wasn't that helpful. And in the Oprah special where she's talking to the victims of Michael Jackson, the Finding Neverland after story, she has this interesting quote where she says she thinks spiritual or sexual abuse is actually a broken term, because in the case of what happened to the two boys from Finding Neverland, they liked it a lot of the times.
They like the attention.
Yeah, I mean, you get to a point where you're groomed to want what's hurting you.
Yeah.
So what she said is like a next level definition of abuse is actually more about coercion than it is actual abuse. Because abuse, when you think of abuse, you think, oh, you hit the person and there's a bruise or blood or rape, something violent.
And they're yelling, stop,
yeah.
leave me alone.
But most damaging things are actually not forced. They're trained. So
I like the psychological abuse happens first, I think, often.
Yeah, or whatever you call it. I mean,
yeah.
I think we were coerced, absolutely. But I think the people that coerced us are coerced, and I think we coerced other people. So the cycle goes on.
Right.
Until it doesn't.
Until
which is what we're doing.
Yep.
That's it. That's an hour. We covered 9 questions out of
how many? Oh, geez.
36.
Okay.
So this is going to be a 3-sessioner. Leave a comment if you think we're wasting too much time on this, and we'll probably ignore it. But if it makes you feel better, you can.
Oh, that's funny.
But no, the comments have been very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think this is great discussion.
And I guess just a few announcements. First of all, our Facebook discussion group, if you want to discuss these topics further, you can leave a comment. But if you really want to discuss it, I would recommend joining the Facebook discussion group. It's really cool right now. There is like a couple rules, like privacy. You can't talk about people inside of it because it's a safe place for people that aren't ready to be outed yet.
Don't try to convert people to any religion.
I gotta tell the story.
Okay.
And then we gotta end with this, but I'm gonna talk about it in the next episodes. But so one of the questions today, which is a very asinine one, was.
What does asinine mean? I know it's not good.
No, I think it's not bad. I think it means it's like unnoticeable.
Oh.
If you're like asinine, you're like
Why is it called asinine if it's unnoticeable?
I don't know, but it means it's like it doesn't cause any waves. It's like a moot point almost.
Okay.
I think.
Cool.
Okay, so one of the comments was pretty asinine, and it was requested to be anonymous, and it's someone that's like 15 states away that we know. But I was like, "Can we use your first name?" And they're like, "No." 15 states away. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is not to make fun of this person, because I actually totally get it. That's how crazy some of these environments are, where you feel like even on a Facebook, on a podcast that 1,000 people in the world listen to, you have to not just hide your name from asking a very normal question. You can't even be associated with people. So when we talk next week about answering the question, were we involved in a cult? I want you to think about that story about when someone has to hide the fact that they're even asking a question to people.
Yeah.
What the fuck is going on here?
Yeah. That's like afraid of the government level.
Well, there's some sort of control or oppression going on.
Definitely. Oh, definitely. No,
and
that shit's
I'm
real.
saying this is a valid fear, and that's why we have to
So
protect the anonymity, because people have been hurt.
Yes.
They've been kicked out of things. They have to be prepared for their kids to get kicked out of everything.
Yeah.
And it's hard, and it's painful, and it's being used to threaten people. And I think you used a good word of bullying.
Yep.
Okay, so check that out. I think we have 75 members there, and our podcast just passed 2,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
Tonight. We
That's
have
cool.
A Patreon page. If you want to support this, we appreciate it. The link is below. Otherwise, we'll see you next week with more Q&A questions. Thanks for the questions this week, guys.
Peace.